Hey guys, I hope you're all doing well. Welcome back to another video of drawing characters. Today I'm going to be giving one lucky sketch a glow up and turning it into a refined character design. The theme of today's character is a royal chef, so this video is going to be super chill, so sit back and relax and enjoy the time lapse while I share some of the thoughts I had while creating this design. So you probably would have guessed it. I'm starting out with some rough thumbnail sketches. This is the very first step I do when starting pretty much any character design, and once I am happy with any one of these sketches, I will go ahead and begin refining it. But I am getting a little bit ahead of myself here, so let's just take a little step back. Before I actually began sketching, I took some time to collect references and do a little bit of research into the role and look of a chef. I also delved into the history and how the profession actually developed into what it is that we know today. So whilst researching, I came across something which was quite interesting that I thought I'd share. During the ancient medieval times, being a chef wasn't actually a profession. Chefs were usually just hired by those who could afford them, such as the royals or people that were just really wealthy. And so being a cook wasn't actually a proper profession. In fact, being a cook was a low-ranking role, so it wasn't highly respected or well regarded. And this was quite surprising to me because I feel that food plays such an important part in our lives, and surely somebody that cooks and feeds people for a living would be seen as a high-ranking role and would be respected. But apparently that was not the case back then. So that was quite an interesting fact that I came across. Also, you might be wondering where the idea of designing a chef come from. And to be absolutely honest, it was sort of random, and it was also one of the first things to pop up in my head while I was brainstorming ideas of character designs I could do. And I don't know why, but I also find myself naturally drawn towards concepts like cooking and food. And since a royal chef is something that I have never explored before, character-wise, I felt this was something that would be quite fun to try out. And so after I finished doing these rough sketches, I took a moment to just step back and see what I'm actually drawing. And I see that I have in some ways slightly sort of lost the plot a little bit, and I will explain why. So when I am doing these sketches, I'm really just putting down the first thing that comes to my mind. And so there is no clear direction or intent behind a lot of these sketches. And the reason I say why I might have lost track while designing this character is because if you look at the character on the very far right, he's wearing these trousers with stitched patches. And I think that when you think of a royal chef, that's probably not the first thing that comes to mind. I think a lot of the sketches here look a little rough around the edges and not as polished as I would envision the character of a royal chef would look like. Because usually when I think of a chef, the first thing that comes to mind is someone that is clean, professional, and looks polished. And when I am seeing a lot of these sketches here, I don't really get that impression. In fact, I sort of get the impression that they are still chefs, but they might just cook for an everyday normal restaurant, you know, like a restaurant down the street or something. And so that's why I am really glad that I took a step back after I had done these sketches to revise my approach to this character. So moving forward, I am now designing whilst keeping the royal theme more in mind. And in the end, I started doing this sketch over here, and I absolutely loved it. I just felt like, yes, this is my chef. And I felt quite confident going forward to refining it. And speaking of chefs, I want to take a moment to talk about one of my favorite animated movies, and it's Ratatouille. There is no denying that I drew heavy inspiration from this movie when designing this character. And yes, I know that the plot is quite bizarre when you think about it. It's about this rat that knows how to cook. So he sits on top of this guy's head and controls his movements. It is definitely not meant to be in line with reality. But with that being said, if you put the actual story to the side, you will find that the message of the movie and the characters themselves are so well written and brilliantly designed that for me, I just can't help but keep going back to that movie every now and then. And honestly, at this point, it's just become a comfort movie for me. Also, I don't know if you guys have ever watched the movie Boiling Point before. That movie deserves an honorable mention because it is simply amazing. It's probably one of the only movies that I have seen that actually pulls back the curtain and shows you the reality as well as the not so glamorous side of being a chef. It's definitely a movie that isn't as talked about, and it's also one of the more realistic ones that I've seen. What I really like about the movie is that it doesn't shy away from showing you the reality and how much pressure those that work in a kitchen truly go through on a daily basis. And so I highly recommend that you watch the movie if you ever get the chance. And a little fun fact about the movie is that it is filmed entirely using one take, which in my opinion makes it 10 times more impressive. There are no cuts, no fancy transitions or anything like that during the movie, and I think that is simply genius because I don't think I've ever watched a movie that's made me feel pressure the way the movie Boiling Point did. And when you think about it, because there are no cuts, it means that you never get a break from what you're actually watching. There is this constant pressure that is just bubbling away continuously, and as a viewer, you can't help but feel it throughout. And because there are no cuts, it's absolutely uninterrupted. You feel that pressure. And I think that feeling itself that is being delivered is probably the reality that most people that work in a kitchen face every single day. It's this feeling of being under constant pressure and having to put out the highest quality of work whilst not having the best resources and just being pushed to your limits, really. And so the movie does an incredible job of delivering all these complex, subtle emotions, both visually and emotionally. Again, highly recommend you go watch the movie if you get the chance to, because I assure you, your eyes will not leave the screen. So going back to me drawing over here, once I am happy with the line art, I will move on to colour. Now, I am no expert when it comes to colour, so I'm not going to pretend like I know what I'm doing. In all honesty, I just put down a colour and hope and pray that it looks good, and then I just repeat that process for the whole illustration and pray it comes out looking somewhat decent. So colour is definitely not one of my strongest points. However, it is something that I want to dive into and learn more about. And so I am thinking of actually starting a series where I draw things that I suck at. And I think the first thing that I would definitely have to draw is hands and feet, because it is quite embarrassing how bad I am at drawing hands and feet. And so I think doing a little series like that would be quite beneficial. And it will also allow me to face the things which I have been avoiding for quite a long time. So let me know what you think of the idea, and if there's something that you struggle with, comment it down below so we can at least complain about our art frustrations together. And so going back to the movie Boiling Point, I think it showed me that in order to become a chef, sometimes you have to have this borderline unhealthy obsession with food. And I might be completely wrong, because there might be plenty of chefs out there with a completely healthy relationship with food who aren't working themselves to death. However, I still think that there are a lot of chefs out there who are extremely passionate about food and wanting to master their profession. And whilst it's great to pursue your passions, I feel that even the most passionate ones aren't immune to things like burnout and fatigue, because they're only human after all. In fact, when I think of being a chef, that's the first thing that comes to mind. It's putting in the long hours and the feeling of burnout. And don't get me wrong, I cook on a daily basis myself. However, if I had to do it as a full-time job with my livelihood on the line, I don't think I would be able to handle that type of pressure. And so I think it's safe to say that chefs are definitely a different breed. And I do respect the insane dedication and work ethic when it comes to becoming a chef. And I also feel that even when you become a successful chef, then you have this extra added pressure because everyone knows you. So now all your food has to be amazing, it has to be on point. And now it's almost like you can't be a learner because you are perceived as an expert. And this is one thing that I will say about Gordon Ramsay. I really like Gordon Ramsay, not only because he's so entertaining and has some of the best insults I've heard, but also because this man refuses to stop learning. Even though he is a world-renowned chef that everyone and their grandma knows, he still goes out there to explore new parts of the world and to try new cuisines and cooking techniques. And that's something that I really admire, because if I was at that stage of my career where you could say that I have achieved a great amount of success and I've sort of made it as a chef, I don't think I would crave learning as much. I would feel inclined to get comfortable because I know I've succeeded already, and not really attempt new things because of the fear that I would fail. And especially at that point when you're so successful that you've essentially become a public figure. And failing at that point would become 10 times more scarier because there's that aspect of public scrutiny. And so seeing Gordon Ramsay continue to explore and try new things regardless of this is something that I rarely see other successful people do. So I really respect that ability to be humble enough to become a student again, regardless of what you've achieved. And being willing to learn from others regardless of their qualifications and accolades is again something that's quite admirable. And it's definitely something that I also like to keep in mind as well. No matter how old I get or how much I achieve in my lifetime, I always want to be a student and I always want to keep learning new things every day. And so that is it for today. I really hope you enjoyed the end result as well as the entire time lapse of me refining this design. If you like this video, consider subscribing to help support the channel. Also, if you want to color this character for yourself, you can download the PNG. I've left a link in the description box below. And that's it from me. I hope you enjoy the rest of your day and I'll see you in the next one.